All right. Folks, we're back. And your clergy is being geared and set up to betray you. Your pastor, your minister, your shepherd, your rabbi, your priest. They're being set up and enlisted in a war against you, their own flock. Homeland Security has got a program out there. They actually have a name for it. It's called the Clergy Response Team. You know what it is? The Clergy Response Team enlists the clergy to quell public unrest if martial law is ever declared. Well, let's analyze that for a moment. First of all, apparently the government must believe that martial law is relatively imminent, or they wouldn't go to the expense, time, and trouble to set up these clergy response teams. Secondarily, they understand that in order to control the masses, they can use the number one community organization of all historical time to gain the access to the most ears simultaneously. Nothing works better than the church. And, worse yet, your minister, your pastor, may well be a participant. So I ask you, have you spoken to your pastor about this? Have you talked to your priest about this? Have you addressed it with him or her? Have you spoken to your rabbi? These folks are being trained. The clergy response teams are actually receiving federal government training to, quote, quell dissent and pacify citizens to obey the government in the event of a declaration of martial law. Guys, this has been going on since May of 2006. This was exposed as a nationwide FEMA program training pastors and other religious representatives to become secret police informers who teach their congregations to, quote, obey the government in preparation for the implementation of martial law, property and firearm seizures, mass vaccination programming, and forced relocation. Your priest, your pastor, your minister may have already been compromised. If they have, and you don't know that, that should start a war within your own congregation. I'm demanding that you go and have a frank but public discussion with your priest and the elders in your church, whomever they are. I don't care whether you call them deacons or priests or whatever you call them. I'm demanding that you and a coalition of your congregants stand up and demand to know, have they been contacted by this organization? Are they a participating member? What information, what documentation has been given to them? What have they been taught? What have they been told? Know your church. It's your own little micro-government. Are they playing or are they silent? Are they involved? Are they conspiring against you? Or are they just fleecing you for weekly fundage? You see, if they're a 501c3 corporation, which is what most tax-exempt organizations and churches are, religious organizations, then they've already sold you out for a pittance, a Judas exemption from taxes. They've taken your money, and in order to not have to share any with the government, they've agreed to work against your best interest. They've agreed to allow their sheep to be sacrificed to the wolves so that they can keep a tax exemption. I know I'm going to get a ton of email and maybe even phone calls, and the social media will be all over this. I don't really care. If you're a minister, you're a priest, you're a rabbi, you're a deacon, you're an elder, and you've betrayed your congregation, they should know it. You should be ousted, and that's the truth. And if you don't like that, go look up in your Bible where it says Thou shalt not lie. Then, and only then, do you have a right to say anything to me. I'm just exposing your fraud, your treason to your own congregation. Nothing more. You want to be angry at me because you've betrayed your congregation, then hold a sermon this following Sunday that says, we haven't done that, and here's why we want you to know it. Then get your congregation staffed up and prepared by starting to create a cooperative to buy food and clothing and ammunition and weapons and training so that they can survive the coming onslaught and the collapse of the society that's about to hit us like a ton of bricks. Your job is to keep your flock well. Your job is to keep your flock protected. If you've betrayed them, that's on you. I'm willing to bet most folks in your church and in your congregation would rather see taxes paid. You see, people in the church don't really care about whether taxes are paid or not. In fact, most of them don't even know that a church is tax exempt and what the cost of that exemption is. Most don't even know. If you are a member of a church and your senior leadership, and I mean your ministers, pastors, whatever you want to call them, your shepherds, are not telling you the truth, you need to be an activist member and start a revolt in your own church. Find it out. Know for a fact what they've agreed to, what they're being paid for, or whether that's paid by money or whether that's paid by special dispensation or whatever. Because the truth is, if they're a member of the Clergy Response Team, they're the ones who are sitting and saying to you, we can't hold a political discussion in church because of the separation of church and state. That's a lie, and it's inexcusable. And it proves to you that your church has sold you out. Have all churches sold out? No. And I'm not suggesting that they have. I am telling you that it's up to you to know if yours has, because I can tell you this, the vast majority have. If yours has not, then you're in the minority. Here's an article from KSLA. Homeland Security enlists clergy to quell public unrest if martial law ever declared. This is back from 2007. How long has this been going on that you were kept in the dark? Could martial law ever become a reality in America? Some fear any nuclear, biological, or chemical attack on U.S. soil might trigger just that. Hold on. How about financial collapse? KSLA News 12 has discovered that the clergy would help the government with potentially their biggest problem. Us. Charlton Heston's now famous speech before the NRA at a convention in 2000 will forever be remembered as a stirring moment for all Second Amendment advocates. At the end of his remarks, Heston held up his hand, his antique rifle, and told the crowd in a Moses-like voice, "Over my cold, dead hands." While Heston, then serving as NRA president, made those remarks in response to calls for more gun control laws at the time, those words live on. Heston's declaration captured a truly American value, an overarching desire to protect our freedoms. But gun confiscation is exactly what happened during the state of emergency following Katrina in New Orleans. If martial law were enacted here at home, like depicted in the movie The Siege, easing public fear and quelling dissent would be critical. And that's exactly what the Clergy Response Team, in quotes, helped to accomplish in the wake of Katrina. A chaplain for the Shreveport Fire Department and the Cato Sheriff's Office says the clergy team's mission, the primary thing that we have to say to anybody is, let's cooperate and get this thing over with, and then we'll settle the differences once the crisis is over. There you go, folks. There's the phrase you're going to hear on Sunday morning. Folks, let's just cooperate, do as the government tells us. They're in control. They're working in our best interest. We can settle the differences later. Turn over your guns, show up, give them your ID, make sure you take the mark, take the whatever stamp they're going to give you, wear the dog tags they hand you to show that you're a participating member, squeal on your neighbor, rat out the guy who won't turn in his guns, turn over all the stored food and ammunition that you have. Don't be a rabble-rouser. Give unto Caesar, blah, 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 blah. Is your pastor preaching that now? I'm asking you flat out. Use your critical thinking and read between the lines. Does your pastor refuse to allow conversation and political discussion to be involved in his sermons? Is it all just hellfire and damnation, or God's going to come and save us at the very end? And at the 11th hour and 59th minute, just before it all goes boom, you're going to get drawn to heaven? Call him a liar right to his face and ask him why he's sold out his congregation. Is that too harsh? Tough. What's really harsh is any pastor or clergy person who would lie to his own congregation at the behest of a tyrannical government seeking his or her assistance to eat his congregation alive. Are you being played by your own pastor? Guess what? They've contacted most of them, and yours is probably a player. Your job is to know how far they've gone. The feds actually have a training program. In May, this was exposed that they were training pastors and other religious representatives to become secret police enforcers who teach their congregation to obey the government in compliance and preparation for the implementation of martial law. There was a whistleblower who was enrolled in the program, and he came forth and broke the story, and that he came out and said that the feds are clandestinely recruiting religious leaders to help implement Homeland Security directives in anticipation of a potential bioterrorist attack or any natural disaster or nationally declared emergency. The first directive was for pastors to preach their congregations Romans 13, the often taken out of context Bible passage that would use by Hitler to hoodwink the Christians into supporting him, in order to teach them to obey the government when martial law is declared. It was related to the pastors that quarantines, martial law, and forced relocation were a problem for state authorities when enforcing federal mandates due to the cowboy mentality of citizens standing up for their own property rights and Second Amendment rights, and the framers defending their defending their crops and livestock from seizure. It was stressed that pastors need to teach subservience to the authorities ahead of time in preparation for roundups and to make it clear to the congregation that the government is doing this for your own good. Pastors were told that they'd be backed up by law enforcement in controlling those individuals in their congregations who are uncooperative. Really? The story has been confirmed repeatedly, folks. This isn't tinfoil hat nonsense. This is reality. And they are preparing to subjugate you and use your church to accomplish that. What I'm saying to you is that you, and maybe 2 or 3 or 5 other like-minded individuals in your church, should be raising the specter and raising the alarm within your own congregation. First, do this. Get your pastor together. 4, 5, 8, 10 of you. Collectively, get your pastor together along with your senior, whatever you call them, elders, deacons, what have you. And your assistant pastors and whomever. And you grill them. You hold a hearing. You demand to know, have they been contacted by the DHS? Have they been enrolled in this program? Have they received any training? Have they agreed to participate? To what extent have they? What kind of... Listen, they work for you. They get paid by your church and your donations. The church is just like any other government. It belongs to you, we the people of the church. You need frank answers, and you need them now. Because if that pastor has been selling you down the river, you and the rest of your congregation need to know about it. Declare an open revolt in your church and oust that monster. If that person and anyone in your church has sold you out, you don't give them 1 second's worth of respite. No apologies are accepted, nothing else. Traitors and treasonists are out. And I don't care if you don't have a pastor, somebody step up and become the new flock leader. Don't let the church break you down. Folks, this is being done for a reason. They know where this is headed. Dr. Durrell Tuberville serves as a chaplain for the Shreveport Fire Department, and he says the primary thing that they're told is, here's the mantra, the primary thing that we say to anybody is, let's cooperate and get this thing over with, and then we'll settle the differences once the crisis is over. Remember the ringing call from Madison wherein he says that crisis is the rallying cry of the tyrant. Clergy response teams would walk a tightrope during martial law between the demands of the government on one side and the wishes of the public on the other. Quote, in a lot of cases, these clergy would already be known in the neighborhoods in which they're helping to diffuse the situation, says Sandy Davis. He serves as the director of the Cato Bossier Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. For the clergy team, one of the biggest tools that they'll have in helping calm the public down and to obey law is the Bible itself, specifically Romans 13. Tuberville elaborates, quote, because the government's established by the Lord, and that's what we believe in the Christian faith. That's what's stated in the Scripture. That's a lie. That's not what Scripture says. If you're so blindfolded and hoodwinked that you don't realize that you're being given the Jim Jones Kool-Aid of treason in your own church, you're a sorry case. There you have it, folks. Homeland Security is getting our churches to sell out the American people, to sell out their own congregation, to sell out their own friends, their neighbors, the people who they're supposed to be supporting. Did you know that the Black Robe Regiment was made up of all of the senior staff members of George Washington's army, and that almost 80% of George Washington's senior military command were clergymen? Do you know why? Because that, ladies and gentlemen, is the original community organization. Churches make up most of the fabric, the moral and ethical fabric of the United States of America. Churches have influence over the vast majority of this nation and the people within it. As things become more and more desperate, more and more people will flock to churches looking for direction, looking for shepherding, looking for leadership. And if those clergy members who are supposed to be gathering those flocks in and leading them down the appropriate path have agreed to sell them out, then I don't know, you're setting yourself up for the Jim Jones party. I mean, really. So what I would be doing is I would be getting together with a group of other members in my church. I would be forming an investigatory committee. I don't care what your bylaws say. I don't care what your church rules and organization rules say. This is your life. This is your religion. This is your faith. This is your nation. This is your country, your city, your state, your church. You have a right to know. But our laws say we can't discuss this. Really? What law? If an unconstitutional law is passed by Congress, it's no law at all. And the same applies to your church. If a bylaw is placed in your church that supports or standardizes the betrayal of your own congregation, and you're willing to agree to that, I don't know why you're even going to church. Why would you do that? Why would you be willing to accept that? Why would you be accepting of tyranny within your own church? Ladies and gentlemen, desperate times do, in fact, really call for desperate measures. We are in desperate times. We live in a police state. You haven't been officially notified, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. You just haven't been told officially. And if your clergy is hiding the truth from you, then, with all due respect, that's on you, and you should stop it. The only way to do that is to know first and foremost, is it not? Don't you need to know if you're being sold down the river by your own priest? Don't you have a right to know? I would call them before a review board and ask them flat out. We demand as a congregation to know and understand. What have you done in reference to this program? Are you a participant? Have you been contacted? What training materials have you accepted? What training have you been given? What is your response to that? Where do you stand on it? We demand an answer. We need to know. And if we find out that you're lying, we're going to oust you. Because thou shalt not lie. Pretty easy, isn't it? Every church across America should be holding a discussion right here, right now, this week. And you'll know who that pastor is, by the way. This is the pastor who says we're never allowed to have political discussions in church. That's outside the scope of the church's responsibility and involvement. This is the person who won't let you talk in church. This is the person who's pulled you aside and counseled you and said, listen, political talk is really not appropriate here in church. Remember, in Romans 13, that's when you know. That's when you know. If your church is preaching to you Romans 13 and they do it with a fairly regular basis, that's when you know. And I don't care what they say to you, that's when you know. And if you know, then you better take action. You better either resolve the church problem or get out of the church and go find another one. It's entirely up to you, and this is your life, this is your church, this is your nation. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, the time for sitting around fiddling about, dawdling, and waiting for something wonderful to come along and save you is over. The time to take action is right now. Has your pastor, your priest, your mentor betrayed you? You should know. You should know. And if they have, you should have a plan of action on how to deal with it. As an individual, as a family, and as a congregation, and a family of believers. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to tap on this new AT&T data matrix in use by the DEA and law enforcement. This thing makes the NSA's phone scandal look like a walk in the park, folks. And we are going to see some very, very ugly things coming out of this right now. We'll be back in just a moment. You can find us everywhere on the web. You can get us at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us at facebook.com/AmericasVoiceNow. And you can catch us on YouTube and this and every other program. If this hits home with you, share it with your friends. Everybody in a church ought to have heard this show today and be talking about it.